Again, Maxie, let me apologize to you on the record. And
No problem.
Again, Oksana will be fired for messing up what the hell is it called? Daylight savings out here?
Yeah.
You know, in the era of digital phones, it's not even a thing to me. And I've been walking around the house all day freaking out because every clock that isn't digital in here was showing it was an hour ahead.
Okay.
You understand this happens twice a year.
We're never
It's
ready
not
for
like
it.
it's not like a new thing that's just happened.
It is when you have a digital malaise that you live in. I live in the metaverse.
You got to be prepared, man.
Zuckerberg's letting me in. Now, the other thing is Clark works in Arizona, which again is a state that doesn't have it anymore.
It's the only state in these states united that does not honor daylight savings time because they do their own thing in Arizona. So but it doesn't matter. Why are we talking about this? Who cares?
Well, actually, I did have a segue because I do think it is kind of interesting because it's kind of, I mean, okay, so we're in the US. Where are you right now, Maxie?
I'm in Vilnius, Lithuania.
Lithuania.
Oh, wow.
Now, out here, you know, we're a republic. So there are 5 different houses basically that are working together to make this thing work. 50. I said 5. Now, the thing is, the stupid daylight savings thing, you know, 49 of the states abide by it, but 1 don't. And you could argue that that's a system breakdown when we're trying to connect. Now, Clark trains people in other states, so this is a complicated thing that people didn't consider. And the way that you came onto our radar, and the reason I'm kind of starstruck talking to you, is I think you've made the most important, unglorified zombie apocalypse film I've ever seen with the Gerber Syndrome. Dude, now I'll tell you, I've shown a couple people the movie, and everybody's like, what the hell is this COVID film you're trying to show me? Like, everybody's so burnt out by it. But then I'm like, dude, this was made in 2011. I can't even like.
So here's my question.
Yeah.
What the fuck do you know, Maxie? What kind of secret powers? Who's on the inside here? We're on to you, man.
Well, I have to say it didn't feel good, honestly. When last year I started seeing and things, as you know, people started talking about COVID in Italy because in Europe it started in Italy like 100 kilometers away from where I live. The epicenter was in Bergamo, which is like 2 cities away. And to see things that looked a lot like what we did 10 years ago with Gerber Syndrome, it didn't really feel good. And I have to add this, that the film in Italy is on Amazon Prime. And I checked it out in like a few months ago. And when I saw that the distributor wrote they changed the log line on the Amazon Prime page, they changed before COVID, there was Gerber Syndrome, which to me was a very distasteful thing. And I wrote them and said, please change it. Ours is a piece of fiction. To me, it seemed very disrespectful, and I asked them to change it. And we also considered, knowing how easy nowadays it is to spread fake news and to spread something, believing that it's real, that I thought about maybe we should make a press release or something saying Gerber Syndrome is a fiction film. It's not real. So if anyone sees pieces of it taken out of context and used for different purposes, don't believe it. But then I thought it might attract the attention on it even more. So we didn't do anything. But yeah, there are a lot of things that were eerily actual.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You never know what you put out there on social media, how people are going to take it. Because you could go out there and just be like, hey, this is not like a denier film. We're not trying to make up some weird lore that we're trying to get you to buy. And then people could see that and be like, oh, yeah, it could totally be taken that way. And then that person will turn around and turn it into that. So it's interesting. I was also kind of curious how you thought. Like, so in your film, in the Gerber Syndrome, we have a zombie apocalypse that's treated. Oh, man, I don't even know how to approach this because I try to imagine seeing your film in 2011. And I think I might have been like, it's kind of boring or something. Where now, when the film opens up, it's like,
well, I mean, I've known you for close to a decade.
Yeah.
I did not know you in 2011. And in the short amount of time that 6 years that I've known you,
Yeah.
6-7 years, you've grown a lot. You've adapted, you've evolved as a human. I can only imagine how much of a shithead you were at 2011.
Yeah, well, I think it's just because it's almost like now Maxie's other work he's done a couple of real documentaries.
Mhm.
And I think what I'm saying by boring is, what whoever's distributing his film in Italy, they're trying to make it more sensational, like, oh, before COVID there was this nightmare, where I think a lot of horror fans kind of need that. Where if you came in, you're like, oh, the fucking zombie apocalypse. You're looking for Zack Snyder on Netflix.
Yeah.
And then you come into the Gerber Syndrome and you're like, is this a real documentary?
There's no heist.
Yeah, there's no heist in your film, Maxie. No, and I'm curious, like, where did that level approach? Like, it's a very sober approach of what turned out to be a very true application of a government trying to struggle with like its society catching a very contagious disease. Like, do you have a medical background?
No, but I tried to research as much as I could, and I spoke extensively with doctors back then. And there wasn't COVID, but Gerber syndrome was born out of in 2009, there was this swine flu epidemic or avian flu epidemic. It was a bit mixed. And there was a bit of paranoia around. There was, uncomparable to what COVID is doing now, but there were some people who were getting it, some people died. So there was a lot of anxiety around it. So that's what started me into thinking about that. And then I wanted to approach it. I'm a big zombie fan. I like it. It's many zombie films, Romero's films were very inspirational to me. And meeting him with Gerber syndrome in a festival was one of the high points of my life. But I didn't want it to be like sold and packaged as a zombie film. I wanted to, there were elements of it, but I wanted to be as far as possible from zombie cliches, although some maybe remain. So I spoke to epidemiologists, I spoke to virologists, and I asked them, about all these viral diseases that I read that are in many regards worse than what you see in films. There are diseases like the Japanese Japanese encephalitis, which is terrible, or malaria, some kind of forms of malaria. This doctor described me things that happened that he saw while being a doctor in Africa, in some difficult areas in Africa. And he described them, as scenes out from The Exorcist. Little girls that could be hardly contained because they would have so much strength out of this feverish disease that was hard to believe. So I tried to use all those things and make them as real as possible. Or there is a thing mentioned about Cuba, which was real, that when there was the beginning of AIDS, when AIDS started spreading in Cuba, they didn't have enough money or resources to treat it and approach it the way other countries did. So what they did was that to test all the population and everybody that was positive, they put them on an island and fuck off, and that's it. And nobody ever saw them again. And it's not much known, but in the medical community, it is known. So I tried to use these real-life horrors and put them in the film.
Now, were you saying that George Romero got to see your movie?
I don't know if you saw the film, but there was this science fiction festival in Italy, and he was the big guest because they were screening a restored version of Dawn of the Dead. So I was invited with my film. I don't think he came, but towards the end of the festival, they told us there's going to be a special dinner in a restaurant. So I went and I saw him alone at the table with his wife at the back of the restaurant. And I was there with my friend, the main actor of Gerber syndrome. So I told him, let's just go straight. And I sit at the table and I was translating the menu in Italian for them. And, you meet with somebody who was, since I was a teenager, a kind of a hero for you. And you would think you would have so many things to ask and to say. And in the end, I didn't really know what to say. And I just heard some funny stories that he said, and he was very sweet. And they told us beforehand, don't ask for autographs because he has arthritis, so it's painful for him. But at the end of the evening, he was very kind. He said, "Oh no, of course I'm gonna." And so I had my copy of Dawn of the Dead. He signed it, and it was a very special moment.
Is Dawn of the Dead your favorite of the trilogy?
I'm more attached to Night of the Living Dead because it was the first one I saw, and I think it is a very socially relevant film for many reasons. But I mean, that and Dawn of the Dead, I think, of course, are very important. But also Day of the Dead, I think it's a bit underrated, but it has a lot of values. It's probably the most claustrophobic of all.
Yeah, I think Dawn of the Dead is an interesting comparison to the Gerber Syndrome because he was kind of touching on dense urban population and how structures can break down and how people are kind of like the minute you realize that like national security isn't really an option, that's what the zombie apocalypse is in most of horror genre, where it's like you're left alone, find a gun, shoot them in the head, right? Like it's a very, I don't know, it's a very romanticized thing here in America. And you know, when you watch the Gerber Syndrome, God, I would have loved to known what George Romero thought. Because I can't tell. I keep going back and forth. I can't tell if the Gerber Syndrome is a more cynical look at humans and the way, like, I can't tell if there's an underlying theme of this is all an illusion. And at the end of the day, we're going to fight each other for a loaf of bread. Or if it's more of an optimistic thing where it's like, we won't instantly succumb to the zombie apocalypse. And because that's always the thing. One little outbreak and the whole nation is gone. Where in your film, it's a slower progression. And honestly, it could be considered optimistic. I don't know. What do you think? Did you make this film? Is it a hopeful film, The Gerber Syndrome?
Back then, no. I don't think I was very hopeful back then. I thought that, well, I am very appreciative of your comparison with Romero. Of course, I wouldn't dare to put, I mean, but anyway, I appreciate it a lot. I think the great feat that Romero had and that many, as far as I know, not many else did, was that for him, the true monsters are the humans, not the zombies. And not many others, I think, caught that glimpse that the true horror comes in human society and when it starts functioning as it shouldn't, rather than creatures eating each other.
Well, okay, now let me stop you there because one of the arguments I always get into with people, because there are a lot of people who are like, dude, society wouldn't collapse. Like it would look more like Shaun of the Dead, where like you last for 2 days and then the government shows up and they're like, hey, we're here, don't trip.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, what you're talking about, the humans being the real monster, is so many people when they're like, I don't know, playing video games or anything, one of the downfalls in a film is you fend off the zombies and you board up the front door again and you come up and your wife is turned into a zombie. And this is always a downfall for a protagonist or a hero in a film. And so many people when they're watching, it's like, oh, you just put them down. Like, why do people always go like, oh no, and then they get eaten? And I'm like, well, if you're going to be the person that just shoots your loved one, I think you've lost your humanity completely now. Where your film does a better job articulating like, hey, there's government rules and regulations, but we're going to hide our daughter in our home. And I think this is what's best for her. And it's kind of like, I don't know, we get two sides of that coin in yours. So I don't know. I'm curious. Do you think you should just put a bullet in your loved one right away?
I don't know. It's a very difficult question that you're asking me. It would take me more time to find a proper answer, and also trying to find an answer in comparison to what's going on right now, what has been happening until, last year. I think that very same question happened to several people who might have had, like a grandfather or a grandmother who starts showing some kind of disease, and what should you do? One of my best friends, her grandmother died recently, not out of COVID, but still she survived COVID. But she was taken to the hospital and nobody could see her again. And, you pose yourself those questions. So not only people who die, but also die away from your loved, caring ones. So that same question, should I denounce what's happening or should I hide it? It's a tricky question. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know.
I don't think there is a right answer, really.
No, not really, no.
Yeah, actually, Oksana, didn't that happen to your grandma? she didn't pass away, thankfully. But your mom was in a position where she was in a home.
Yeah, there was a terrible miscommunication where I guess they thought she tested positive and they were calling my mother in the middle of the night, like having her prepare final wishes. And she just like completely dumbfounded. Like, where is this all coming from? And I don't know. It was a big mix up, but she's fine now.
Yeah, out of the blue, they called her. Yeah, in the night though, they called her in the middle of the night and were just like, "Hey, you need to start making preparations." And she was like, "For what?" And they're like, "Oh, your mom has COVID and she's gonna pass. Also, you can't come in and see her because she has COVID." And then it turned out she's fine.
Yeah.
But it's just like, yeah, what the fuck do we do? Everybody's kind of running around with their heads cut off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's scary for everyone too. And it's such a mixed bag showing your movie, Maxie. Because I almost have to warn people, like, hey, this is fiction. Like, so I mean, I remember Guillermo del Toro. We saw him at out here at a theater, and he was showing what movie was he showing?
Crimson Pig.
Devil's Backbone.
Devil's Backbone, not Crimson.
Yeah.
Took a shot.
And somebody asked like a rude fucking question. Out here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we get a lot of terrible Q&As. It's a segment we have on here. And Guillermo just answered, when people watch my movie, you don't really learn a lot about me, but I learn a lot about you. And I was like, damn, what a powerful statement. So the Gerber syndrome, people come into it, and whatever they come out with, I end up learning a lot about them. I remember
that's true.
I showed it to one of our close friends, and I love to pick her brain about movies. And she was like, "Oh, I turned it off in the first half hour because I thought this was a COVID denier film." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, it was made in 2011. And she went, "Oh, holy shit. I thought this was made like months ago."
Yeah, because she's quick to judgment.
I know, but it's also like, how fucking nuts. A decade ago, you made this movie that's speaking to this moment so directly. Like I threw on your film minutes ago and I was just watching the intro, and it's like every time you have like an interview with somebody on the street who's talking about, yeah, I tell all my friends, you always got to wash your hands. And man, does that take me back to 2019. Yeah.
Well, those interviews are real. I mean, those interviews, we were asking different kind of questions, but all those interviews are not actors. That's all real. And about what you're saying about the kind of debates that Gerber syndrome would raise now, yes, I think it could be seen as at least like a vaccine denier film, because at the end there is all this debate, and in the end the girl shows up with all these things. And I mean, I'm not, and I'm vaccinated. I don't know how you guys feel, but I think I'm pretty grateful that I had this chance to do it, contrary to many other people in the world who don't have the chance to have this kind of protection. But other than that, the film, does have this. Back then, I did have some, I didn't feel great about the medical community, because the two elements that pushed me to create Gerber syndrome. One was the thing of the swine flu, and the other was an experience that my mother around that time had breast cancer, and she's recovered by now, she's fine. But she had some experiences with the medical institutions that were, to me, very hard to digest. Like after the operation, she had to start her chemotherapy procedures. And she was going into this very prestigious hospital institution in Milan, which is the city next to where we live. It's the best in Italy that you can get. And at a certain point, her doctor told her, listen, there is this experimental treatment that has been showing some good signs, good results. And but there is a percentage of people who it's still in a treatment, experimental stage. So some people died, some people got heart problems, some people have got this problem. So it's a gamble, but you can try it. And so she spoke with her own doctor, and she thought, no, I'd rather do the traditional one, which is more understood, and so I don't risk. And so they told her, well, fair enough, but then you have to do it somewhere else. So basically they kicked her out of the hospital, even though her own insurance, because partially it was covered by state health institution, and her own insurance said for the second part of the operation that they couldn't cover it because it was considered something aesthetical, as if she was doing her breasts when it was a breast cancer thing. So these kind of things, and I kept the papers of this experimental treatment thing, which was quite horrendous. I mean, it was something that I understand you need to test it, but it should be willing, it should be voluntary. You cannot be like a blackmail. Either you do it or you do it in a worse space to do it. So I had these feelings that were making me feel a bit bad about the medical institutions, but it was 10 years ago. It was different. Today, things are a bit different.
Well, I mean, like all institutions, they do good and they do bad. Like whether it be the police department, which you have a great like law enforcement angle to your movie, or even the medical one. I mean, people love Pfizer right now because of the vaccine. But in 2019, they paid out the biggest lawsuit ever because of the opioid stuff they had been. Yeah. And at the end of the day, they are a company like for profit. So it's like,
very much so.
It's just I get irritated when people are very worshipful. They're worshipful of like these companies. And I'm like, at the end of the day, you got to remember, it is a company. They're making money.
Yeah.
So just I don't know. I think through this whole thing, we got to learn, like, you just got to be friends with people, talk to people, interact. Like once you start getting agoraphobic and weird and you live on the internet, I mean, you start to turn into it. You're looking in the abyss. It's coming back at you.
Absolutely. I don't know how it is now in the States, but in Italy, there are lots of protests about all of this anti-vaxxers and anti-green pass people that are comparing it to the Holocaust or to the apartheid. I mean, it is, the discourse is turning absolutely toxic and ugly. And another side that, in my opinion, has changed drastically since we did Gerber Syndrome is the whole relation to news and to what is real and what is fake. Nowadays, I don't know if I would do a mockumentary again, because it's almost seemed something irresponsible to do. Back then, it was still at the beginning. I don't remember if the first Paranormal Activity just came out or came out shortly after, but it was still quite new. And now it feels a very different world.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, we run a found footage film festival, so I hate to hear that any talented director would not want to make another appropriate in-world camera film. But again, have you ever seen Ghostwatch?
No. Remind me, which one is it?
Ghostwatch was a Halloween event that the BBC broadcasted, and it was supposed to be a live broadcast from the most haunted house in London. Where I can't remember where it was located. And
94? Was it
92? 92. And they pre-recorded it. And they added, they basically faked it. And Leslie Manning, who is a talented and serious director, she said, one, it's about ghosts. And I put ghost in the name. So I'm kind of already like it's not very War of the Worlds in that way. And she's trying to I was trying to be like as upfront as I could. But also at the same time, I wanted people to realize like the BBC was very, they were held in high regard. And she wanted to say, you can't just trust everything you see. Like use your own rationale and do a little bit of research. And then maybe you won't believe that your microwave is turning on and off because a ghost came through your TV. So, I mean, honestly, God, it's so divided out here in America right now. But I'm an optimist at the end of the day. I can't speak for Clark, but I think that this kind of stuff, we get beat down with it until we become skeptical and cynical. And then we just learn to kind of like look at things and be like, I don't know. I mean, our media right now is so biased. I'm not sure how it is where you are, but it's like there's Fox News and then there's everything else. And you pretty much fall in line with your favorite brand. And that's kind of your reality that you're choosing to be in. So I just kind of reject it all. I don't know if
you make your own news.
Yeah, or you make your own news. There you go.
People are into that these days.
Yeah, so I don't know. With mockumentary, I think challenging people and getting them used to kind of being fooled by the format, it could be healthy. It's kind of like you're building an immune system to, I don't know, just being a passive believer in everything you see.
It could be, yeah, actually. If it is approached in the right way and it's not done with the purpose of, if it's done with the wrong intentions, it can be damaging. But if it's done with a good intention, maybe with the intention of making fun, I feel there is a lot of lack of humor. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Things that are happening now. To me, humor is an important thing. And I think that humor was a essential element into mockumentaries for a long time, maybe more mockumentaries than found footages, which to me are, I don't know, to me are quite different, mockumentaries and found footage. But in the mockumentaries, films like the fake one about the moon landing, filmed by Kubrick, to me it's pure fun, and it's great fun. There is a very good one called Death of a President, about the murder of George W. Bush, which is done like a CNN documentary, but it's not. It's a very good film. But there are several which have humor and makes you think about stuff.
I've never seen Death of a President.
It's very cool. It came out, I think, around 2007 or 2008. It might be Australian director, or Australian and American. I don't think it's purely American. And it's a whole thing about the assassination of George W. Bush, killed as like Kennedy was killed.
Okay, now a film like that could be, like, right now, that would be a very divisive film, because I'm sure a lot of Republicans would take that as like, oh, people are coming after me, and film is a very liberal industry.
It would be seen as a death threat.
Yeah, right. So I don't know. Do you think, how was it received? That was in 2013?
I have no idea. No. But before that.
Yeah, it was before. I'm looking at the dirty.
2008, because it was before. I think it was before Obama became president. So it must have been around then.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Maybe 2007.
Have you seen it before, Clark?
No, but I know this cover.
Oh, it's on your favorite shirt.
What?
I don't know.
So I want to circle back. So Maxie, you essentially created a disease. So you were talking about, researching a lot, and swine flu, avian flu, those things. So was it sort of a pick and choose from everything? And also, what was sort of your creative process on that? Of like, I have an opportunity to create a disease. So did you want it to be, as medically accurate as possible? Were you looking for, some, creative infusion there? What was sort of your thought process when you're sort of, trying to figure out what this is that's, causing so much, turmoil?
I would say it was a bit pick and choose. I would, I can tell you a bit about how the whole thing began. It began with my best friend and the girl who plays the redhead girl in the film, who's an actress, and a friend of us who does special effects. And one afternoon, we thought, I have this idea. So we made a little short film, which kind of reassumes the storyline of the bitten girl who gets worse and worse and worse. And we did it in my bedroom with my two friends. It was like, we are roommates. She came back home. She was attacked, and we document her feeling worse and worse and worse. Done in the very same realistic style. And then I showed it to the producer I used to work back then, who liked it a lot, and who said, "Okay, maybe I can." And he financed it in the whole film itself, which was extremely cheap. The whole film costed 30,000 euros, so you could say around $35,000 more or less. So I had to be very creative with the money we had. And so that dictated a lot of choices. What can we do without spending money that we don't have? Because we didn't get any funding from anywhere. It was just him financing. So I started reading. There was this friend of my mother who was working in the infectious disease hospital. I read some Wikipedia stuff myself, because I appreciate the question if I have a medical background, but I don't. So I could just understand Wikipedia, not much more than that. Of course, the zombie kind of like thing was in the back of my mind. I was looking for diseases that would basically fuck your brain, and that you would be, your body could move more or less all right, but your your consciousness would be gone.
Mhm.
And I found stuff that would be in that area. So like malaria, encephalitis, a couple of other diseases that are developed like a fever and hit the nervous system. So then I confronted this doctor that I was speaking with and trying to get what I needed from them. So I would say, would this be realistic? And they would say, yeah, this would be realistic. Would this be not realistic? And then there would be a bit of leeway so that not everything is realistic, but I would find my way through to make something that would be nice. Like
So you wanted to ground everything in realism to a certain extent, right?
as much as possible, yeah. Like some things I guess were very subtle and probably nobody noticed, but to me were important. Like there is a little scene in which the doctor makes a test on the young girl and she lifts her head. I don't know if you remember. And she bends her knees a little, and that's telltale for him. And that's a real sign. It's a real test that you do. I forgot the name. It's like Kreuzberg maneuver or something. And when you do that, it means that there is a lesion to the nervous central system, and it's a sign that proves that you have encephalitis, I think.
Russ,
So I
can we
try
do
to
that right after this show?
What?
Make sure I don't have encephalitis.
I'm imagining this screening in a theater and then like a doctor's in there and he's just like, oh shit, it checks out. Like, has anybody ever reached out to you and been like, dude, what?
The very first screening we had, it was in Italy, in a small town, in a festival. And at the end of the screening, a guy stands up at the beginning of the Q&A and he says, I am a doctor. I am whatever, a film critic. And he wasn't a nice guy. And he said, I was watching this film and I thought for a while it was a documentary. Then I thought it was a horror film. Then I thought it was a drama. And then I realized it's just nothing, because for him, it was neither of these things. And I don't remember what I answered to him. But yeah, no, I never had somebody coming to me. Recently, I got a few messages from people that watched the film after COVID saying how impressed they were. But no, doctors who said that it was very accurate, that you are the first one. So
Dude, he stood up and said, I'm a doctor and a critic.
Yeah.
What a
something
fun
like
dude.
that.
Yeah. Beat me to it.
He probably moved out here to the Bay Area right after, and he's been at every goddamn Q&A I've ever been.
So you have very nasty audiences.
Well, we get a lot of like, oh my God. We saw Takashi Miike.
Mhm.
He came out and he did a Halloween screening. And I remember the first person that stood up said, hello, I'm a linguist and I've been studying Japanese and then they did everything in Japanese too. And it's like,
It was like a 10-minute diatribe of bullshit.
it's like, before I get to my question, let me give you my resume.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's Takashi Miike. He never comes to the U.S.
Also, these people are never very flattering. Wait, you had one for the Lobster, right? Didn't somebody come up and be like, what was up with the goat?
Oh, yeah. So as a part of the SF Film Festival, Yorgos Lanthimos came and
Wow.
was premiering The Lobster, and I was fortunate enough to be there. And someone in the balcony, I never saw her because she was up in the balcony, had like a 5-minute question. And at the end of it, Yorgos said, was that a question? What? I don't know what to say. And then we moved on to the next person. It's like, people just, they get excited. There's nervous energy. I get it. But it's also, there's always an underlying sense of pretension in whatever's being said from the audience.
Well, it's fun when it happens. The thing that sucks is that usually the great comeback comes to you 2 hours later. I should have said that.
Yeah.
It never comes straight away.
Sure.
That's a shame.
Well, I mean, honestly, you were talking about meeting George Romero and being like, what the fuck do I tell him? And I think I kind of got into doing all this, like writing about film and doing a podcast. So I had a reason, because half the time I want to go up to people and be like, hey, I'm a huge fan. I hope I didn't ruin your day by telling you goodbye.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's all for me. I don't think that does anything for them. So, but now we get to pretend like we're some sort of a force, or like we have some hot takes over here. And now we get to demand an hour of your time, where it's
2 hours. Thanks to Oksana.
Which again, she will be fired. And Maxie, I mean, we do a found footage film fest or in-world camera with faux documentary, because we love the medium. I think it's a really great way to have an authentic person come through in film, which is mostly, fictional narrative. And meeting people like you are always they're so interesting, because now you've made a zombie film, a faux documentary, but your other work is like pretty serious documentary work. Like, I was looking through your IMDb and I came across When We Talk About KGB. Now, I don't think I was taken aback, because I'm just scrolling through here and I'm like, wow, I wonder what this is about. And so I go to the storyline. Now, let me just read this from IMDb. Clark, let me know if you've ever heard anybody write something like this.
Here we go.
So the storyline of When We Talk About KGB. I'm not trying to create a political historical portrait of Soviet Lithuania, because the microclimate of the last decade of the Soviet Union is too electrified with misleading tension. What I believe is that by presenting an authentic and individual experience, one can see a cross-section of that time that doesn't push any kind of conclusion, because there cannot be any conclusion under these circumstances. And of course, you wrote that, Maxie.
And I don't remember saying it, but it sounds great.
The prose and the structure of that's very similar to my eHarmony profile.
No, so it's quoted to you, at least. Whoever put that in there, they're quoting you. And I thought it was very striking and like self-aware. And for a documentary to kind of ease in your approach and be like, hey, watch the documentary and draw your own conclusion, and don't be angered by anything you see, because I have no real agenda. I thought that was really interesting. And now I'm kind of bummed that you didn't just write it and put it up there.
Well, probably I did. Again, it was a few years ago, but I didn't, because I moved to real documentaries afterwards. I came to Vilnius, where I'm right now, to present Gerber Syndrome. So it was 2012. It was the Vilnius Film Festival. They invited me, and there I met this woman who was a director and was working for the festival, and then a few years later became my wife. And we started working on this film about KGB together. She was working for the festival, and she invited, it was me and my best friend, we were guests, and they said, oh, maybe you want to go visit this place. And it was the former KGB prison. And it was a very shocking experience to me. And I thought, wow, I want to make a film about this. So I came back to Italy. I spoke to the producer of Gerber Syndrome, and he said, maybe you could do a documentary first, because to make a costume film set in the 70s in Soviet Union sounds very expensive. So it's not really. So I came back to Virginia and we started working on it. And then one thing led to another. And we made this. And now we just finished our second real documentary and working again on fiction. So I'm moving again to fiction back as a director. It's going to be the next project. But yeah, there was 10 years time of real documentaries that look a bit like fiction films, the way they're done, whereas before it was a fiction film that looked like a documentary. So it was a mix.
Can you talk a little bit about your new project?
Yeah, well, I'm back in the disease domain. So before COVID, so this was 2018, I started thinking about a film about the Spanish flu in pandemic, because I was reading some books about it. It's something that, I would talk about it with like my grandmother or her sister, my grandaunt. And they said, yes, it seems like something that everybody knew about, but there are no films about it. There are no books, barely books about it, except historian books. And it was, when you read a bit about it, it was literally the biggest catastrophe of recorded human history. It was like millions and millions and millions of deaths. And it was so surprising to me. How come nobody ever did a film about it, except maybe a crappy TV show done in England or something? And so I started putting some bits and pieces together. And my idea was to have kids, because, I wanted to make a film about how would kids survive on their own in the forest. And at the same time, something about the Spanish flu pandemic. So I added things that these kids have to go live in the forest because of the pandemic, because their mother got it and tells them, close herself in her bedroom and says, I want you to survive, so go in the forest. And this teenage girl, like 12 years old girl, has to take care of her own brother and survive in the forest. And to do so, because the reality is too hard for her to accept, for the little boy to accept, that mom is going to die, everybody around us is dying, our father is a doctor working God knows where. So she makes up a little story, a fairy tale of a little creature that jumps on you and sucks your energy. And it started as a metaphor of what the virus would do to you. And she has to live up to this metaphor. And but then the metaphor becomes slowly real for her. And well, then it's a whole thing about prejudice and about it's plenty of stuff anyway. And so last year I started working the screenplay with Virginia, with my wife, and it developed a lot. And now we are in development stage. It's going to be co-produced between Italy, Lithuania, and Scotland. And hopefully in 2 years, we're going to make it.
Man, you make fun films.
Thank you.
I'm like, how do you counterbalance all this in your real life? Are you like a big comedy fan or anything?
Yeah, humor. It's an important part of my life. Some comedians, I love to collect jokes. I like to tell jokes when the audience is right, and I would say I'm seen as a fun guy. I would say.
Okay, because I think it takes a like very well balanced person to like really dive deep into these like potentially nonfiction like narratives and like live there and really do the justice that it takes to make a film that 10 years later can almost practically come true.
Otherwise, you're going to end up like a doctor critic.
Oh my god!
Oh yeah, I might.
He just doesn't understand.
Actually, in his film, The Doctor That Was Gone, he went out to go review a movie.
What if John Lovitz was a doctor? The critic was a doctor. That's it.
So now,
nothing going on.
Well, I still prefer to have a Q&A, a guy who says I'm a critic and a doctor, than to go to a hospital with a big wound and the guy says, "Yeah, I'm a critic, I'm a film critic, but I'm going to treat your wound." That would be worse.
Was Patch Adams? Was that? Does that count?
Yeah, Patch Adams. Sure.
He's a doctor and a clown.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know if I would feel great if that person was administering a vaccine to me. Came over there and honked his nose before doing it. Yeah. But now, God, Max, I hope you don't abandon in-world camera narrative, because I'm listening to you, and I'm like, you're such a intelligent dude, and then part of me's like, is that the bed from your movie? Was the Gerber Syndrome? Did you shoot that in that room at all?
No. That was shot in Italy.
Okay, that headboard looked a lot like where.
Yeah, does it?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I didn't think about it.
I was like, oh, look at that. Yeah. Now, so what is your new film going to be called? Because usually IMDb will predict the future and talk about 4 projects that you've mentioned to one person once. But on here, the last thing we have is I'll Stand By You, which I'd also like to talk to you about.
I'll Stand By You. It's the film that we released. It came out in cinemas here in Lithuania 2 days ago, and we are touring cinemas to present it. Virginia and I worked on it for the past 5 years, and that's a real documentary about suicide prevention. Because Lithuania now a little less, but Lithuania used to be the country with the highest suicide rate in the world. In Europe for sure, and in the world. Sometimes it's second, sometimes it's third, but it's a very high suicide rate for a number of reasons. And shortly after we finished the KGB film, a producer here approached Virginia and said, "Would you be interested to do a film about suicide?" And our both reaction was, "Oh, not really. It's a very heavy topic." But then they told us about this place, which is a small town, which has the highest suicide rate in Lithuania. It's like a 10,000 people town, and they had a very high suicide rate. And they said there is this woman, a psychologist, who created a system, a grassroots system, together with a policewoman, and it seems to work. And they created this movement, and they reduced suicide rate by 70%. So we lived with them. So to speak. I mean, we would visit them every couple of months to film for 4 years, to show the progress that they did. And I have to say, they asked us, how was it to do this film? Was it hard? But it was a pleasure, because these people are so much fun and so bright and so full of life. And the film for us is like that. It's a bright film. And when we show it to people, the common answer is, I was expecting something heavy. I was prepared to something that's going to make me depressed. And instead I'm full of life and I want to help. So that's a great compliment for us. And it's a film I'm very proud of. This time I was also cinematographer and co-producer. And we're going to show it in Italy in January and then some other countries. But it was a great ride and I'm very proud of this film too.
Now, did their suicide rate go up during lockdowns and COVID?
I think it's too soon to make it, because usually these rates they have to be calculated. So maybe next year we will know. But yeah, probably yeah. I mean, it has been going up in many countries, regardlessly.
Yeah.
In Italy a lot, in France, in Germany, in the States, and as far as I know, the population segment who's doing it the most, it's 20 to 30 years old guys and girls, because of course the lockdown hits them in the moment in which they are mostly socializing and developing, and so that was very sad. In Lithuania probably too.
Yeah, death of despair. I don't know if there's anything worse than that. And I'm really curious. So a police officer and a social worker came together?
Psychologist, yeah.
And a psychologist? What were they doing exactly?
They walk into a bar?
Okay.
Sounds a bit like that. Well, it was very simple, basically, because what made the difference, because there have been several attempts to tackle the problem. But usually the thing would be people from the capital city that come to the province and try to solve their problems. So it would be, the big minds, the big doctors who come and tell people how you should do this and that. And that never worked. Instead, this time there were locals. So she's a psychologist that worked there, and she said, this is where I live. This is where my kids grew up. So very simply, the system was make an arrangement with the local police, and police because it's a very rural area. So you have people that live very isolated, and mostly there are old people. So what police does is they have an officer that goes to isolated houses to visit them. Officially, they go to check that they're safe. Do you have electricity? Do your doors locks all right? Does anybody bother you? And stuff like that. But in reality, they would also check, how are you doing? How is your mood? Do you have somebody to talk to? Are you depressed or anything? When they would see somebody that doesn't look all right, they call the center, and the center, which is the psychologist. If it's somebody who's a bit under the weather but all right, they have volunteers that every day they make a phone call, and they just call and chat so that people have a connection. Otherwise, when somebody really is feeling bad and talking about suicide, they would have free consultation with the psychologist right away. And I can tell that we would follow this policewoman. So I would go and film with her, visiting these people. And one of the times it was January, like imagine snowy, rural area, -20. And it's a place that it looks a lot like the States. When I look at the film, the places could be Kansas, could be Iowa. Nature is very similar. So we go to this house where there is this old man. He looks 95, but he's like 60. And he lives in this house, which is real dark. Imagine, if you check the trailer of the film, you can find it. You can see some shots. Real darkness, really pitch black place. And this guy has been living there alone for 25 years in the middle of nowhere. He cannot walk. He's almost handicapped and everything. And he goes on talking for 20 minutes about how he's going to kill himself as a joke, smiling. And he says, I can do it like this. I can do it like that. I can burn my house down and just hang in the barn. And this was the first meeting. We met another 3 times. And at the third time, he wanted to be filmed. He invited, he created a relationship with this 8-year-old volunteer woman. They became friends. He was playing cards with his neighbor. I saw a radical change, and we filmed it in a course of 1 year, 1.5 years. And I heard that recently he asked this old lady volunteer to marry him. She said no, but still they remain friends. And so I have to say that to witness these real life experiences was absolutely amazing.
Now, did you edit the film too?
No. We had an editor this time. Virginia and I edited the previous film about KGB, but this time, no, we had an Italian editor doing it.
What's that like? Like, it sounds like you took like a cinema verite approach and you had handheld cameras and you're really capturing, like, you know, the best part of these movies are like privileged moments that you could never stage and you catch real emotion. And then how much footage did you have at the end of your shoot?
Not a lot, maybe 60 hours, which is not immense for a documentary.
Now, what are we talking, a feature, right? So how long was the end product?
The end product, it's 74 minutes.
I mean, you whittle down 60 hours into 74 and you hand it out to somebody. Like, what kind of communication do you have with an editor? Like, are you touching base at all, or do you just...
Well, I have to give a lot of, in this case, I think a lot of the work was done beforehand. The screenplay was written by my wife, by Virginia, and she did an amazing job. And if we didn't have 500 hours of footage, it's also because she had very clear idea of what we needed. So beforehand, she would script it down as much as possible, because of course, at a certain extent, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that we would go there knowing pretty much what we needed. And when the editor came in, there was already kind of a storyline on paper that she already did, and she did an amazing job. And then with the editor, she composed it, and there was a first draft, and then a second draft, and then we had an external consultant that came in with fresh eyes and just saw the editing, and she kind of said, this should move here, this should move here, this can, and you know, it's an amazing work that they do. She's she's a editing consultant, and you know, it's just somebody that comes out and knows exactly how to move the pieces so that it works fine. And in the end result works fine. I mean, we're very satisfied by it.
Wow, that's incredible. Scripting out like a documentary like that. Like, we've talked to so many filmmakers, a lot of whom, you know, make like one mockumentary film like yourself, and then we get them on here and we gush about their horror movie, yet they're making films about like gun control or alcoholism. And actually, I'm curious, what did your wife think of the Gerber Syndrome? Did you know her prior to making it, or did you meet her after?
No, I met her. No, I didn't know her before. I came to here to present Gerber Syndrome.
Yeah.
I think that the first time she was okay with it, like not wow, but yeah, it was okay. Maybe we watched it again some other times, few years later, and her opinion seemed to be improved.
Okay, she didn't start judging you after watching it the first time?
No, I wouldn't say no.
Good, because I could see that going weird. Like, what the hell? Like, you're making, like, how much footage did you have for the Gerber Syndrome at the end of that shoot?
Oh, very little. The Gerber Syndrome was shot in 12 days, so very little.
Damn. I mean, so clearly making that film, I knew you probably had to have a storyboard or a script, but everybody feels so candid and natural throughout it. Like,
there was no script.
Okay, there was no script.
I mean, there was a script of scenes, but for example, the main actor, Luigi, the guy who takes the zombies around, he's not an actor. He never acted before. We were we were together in class in elementary school. But he's like that. He's a very brazen guy, very bold and very arrogant at times. And he seemed like the perfect character to do that. So at the time, what was that, okay, Luigi, in this scene, you do this, and you do this. Okay, fine. And he would go and do it. Whenever we would do more than 2 or 3 takes, he would start imitating himself and he would start acting, and you could tell he's acting. So it didn't work. So the key with him was to keep it fresh all the time and eventually improvise something new. Whereas the actors who plays the girl or the parents or the doctor, they were professional actors. And we did some rehearsals beforehand, not many, but a few rehearsals. And but they didn't have scripted lines. Again, it was the dialogue was mostly improvised.
Good move. we watch a lot of found footage and mockumentary, and you can always tell when the line is pre-written and people are delivering a line. Man, you really lose some authenticity there. And I was shocked because your film it's multimedia. You're jumping around a lot, and everything feels on the same plane as just natural and real. Like the doctor in the beginning, does he have any medical background?
You mean the main actor, the doctor that falls for the story? No, not at all.
Like, how do you deliver lines confidently like that? About like
he's a very good actor, I have to say. He's an excellent actor. Yeah.
But I mean, okay, you can be a great actor, but it's in no world is I'm trying to think of in my head, I was thinking Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm like, these are great actors. I'm trying to
speak for yourself.
I'm a big fan of Stallone. I dream to make a observational documentary about him and his life. It's my lifetime dream.
No way.
Yeah, see,
if he should ever be listening to this podcast, Mr. Stallone, please, I just wait for a chance to film you in your life. And just, he seems like a great guy.
See, Maxie, this is incredible you bring this up because yesterday, Russell and I got into a knockdown, drag-out argument about who's better, Stallone or Schwarzenegger. And I'm Team Stallone all the way.
Well, I like both, but as an actor, as a writer, as a director, it's two different things.
I completely agree with that. Now, he's a director and he's smart. He's probably getting at what I was arguing was a negative with Stallone. I was arguing that Arnold comes off a little dumber. You know, I'm a fan of working out. I got his encyclopedia. I like all the weird stuff.
Arnold was a governor.
I know, but he's also kind of a dummy. And I feel like if
he can play a dummy, if he's no dummy.
No, I think he's a little bit of a dummy. And I love him for it because I think he comes across as authentic, which I mean, he was a politician at one point, which just doesn't work out. Where I feel like Stallone, if you're going to make a investigative documentary about somebody, that dude's probably got skeletons in that closet. And he's smart.
I think so.
Well, so does Stallone. Stallone's got secret children.
No, I'm saying Stallone.
Schwarzenegger's got secret children.
You're probably
about the skeletons in the closet. I would put more money on Schwarzenegger than Stallone. Stallone, for somehow he seems a bit more genuine to me. Schwarzenegger, I mean, the fact that he had all that political career. I mean, to reach those levels, I think that you must have a few skeletons. But maybe I'm wrong.
Did you ever see after the Capitol riot when Stallone or Arnold made that video and he had the Conan sword?
That was a good video.
That's a dummy. That dude, I mean,
the fire and the water and the water and the fire.
There's no self-awareness there. And I'll tell you.
There's no self-awareness with Stallone either.
I don't know.
These two have been the most famous people for 40 years.
Now, if you could get Stallone and you were going to follow him around, what would you be hoping to capture? Like, would you just want access to his home and see what he does day to day? Or would you be more interested in like his creative process?
Measure how tall he is?
I'd like to know that.
It's a good question. I think I would be more interested into seeing the everyday life of a character that, you know, has been, as you said, not only one of the most famous people on earth, but a modern time hero, definitely, by all means. I mean, somebody that kids would look up at I want to become like Rocky, or I want to become like Rambo when I grow up. So to have a chance to see his everyday life, maybe there is nothing interesting. Maybe he's just a dude who does his stuff, probably.
Yeah.
But there is a very nice documentary called The Queen of Versailles, which is about the wife of this very rich guy, and it follows a track of how they become very rich, and they're very rich. I don't remember out of what. And they're building this huge palace, which should imitate Versailles. But by then, the 2008 economical crisis happens and they lose all their money. So you see how these billionaires, they get down to the point of selling their clothes. And to me, that was terrible for them. And then in the end, they pick up again. So it was a very interesting arch and very intimate and very close. And that kind of intimacy interests me.
Yeah, you kind of strip away that like faux reality that we're given through TV and film.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think with Stallone it might be kind of depressing too.
Maybe. I mean,
Right.
there are definitely some,
What's wrong with that?
but depressing, it's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something to work with.
Yeah, it's all a
coming
part.
from
It's,
Maxie.
it's all a part of the flavor profile, man. Get a little bit of that bitterness in there. You know, it's good.
Well, I mean, I'd love it. I just Maxie, I'm trying to figure out what kind of carrot I could offer you to keep you in the fiction world.
But I mean, the Spanish flu influenza, that's fiction. That's going to happen. That's the big that's big thing coming.
I know. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I don't know my stance on that film yet. I'm worried you're going to make me sad with it. But then again, I can't tell. I feel like you're an optimist, but your work just hits so hard. That's why I was curious about I'll Stand By You, because that did look like just a purely optimistic film, despite the like subject matter.
It is a very optimistic film. I mean, if you're interested, I can send you if you want to watch it.
Oh, please. I was just going to ask if when we talk about KGB or I'll Stand By You is even available in America.
Not yet. I mean, I'll Stand By You, it's still quite new, so it was still starting to show it in festivals, but I can send you if you want privately. For your eyes only. And KGB, no, I don't think it's available in the States. We screened it in the States. It was in full frame, the festival, but no, I don't think it's available as far as I know.
Yeah, we need more of your work out here. Even the Gerber Syndrome's not available out here at all. I think we were able to find a DVD.
Yeah, the DVD, I think it is Vanguard, I think it's called, the distributor in the States. But yeah, it's a bit sad. I think it could have been released more widely, I think.
Yeah, I wonder though, because now if people are going to watch it, they may, I mean, we know how happy Twitter can be. I could just imagine people on both sides of that very divided space, like putting that film on a pedestal and just manipulating it for whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, financially, it'd probably be pretty good. Actually, who knows? I don't know how much money you still make out of films anymore.
Well, I can tell you, out of Gerber Syndrome, I made the beauty of 175 euros.
All right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Do you have like a merch store or anything for it? Because I bought the film. I'm tempted to be like, I'll pay you. I'll send it to you. Sign it for me or something.
But it's not about that. The film is around. I mean, it is digitally available in like 45 countries. It has been spread. It's not in Italy. It was sold in DVDs and everywhere. It's just, I'm not gonna get into the deals. Everything. Just it wasn't a very good deal.
Well, I mean, if you would have held on to that film for a decade, it'd be like when the pandemic actually hits, just unleash that monster. But now watching you, I have a question. You got a beautiful cover on that DVD. Is that your profile?
Cool. No, it's the sound designer. It's the sound designer.
Oh, me and Oksana were talking about that off air, and she swore it was you. And then I just caught a glimpse of you turning. I'm like, damn, maybe it was.
No, it was, well, thank you. He's a handsome guy, so I take the compliment.
Yeah, I don't know. I love the Gerber Syndrome. And
I can tell you a little detail, a fun thing, which was and it's off the film. So when we did that little, let's call it teaser, this little short film that was before the film that convinced the producer to do it. I showed it to this guy who's a friend and who did the sound design of the film. And he said, oh, that's interesting. That before we did the film, so I said, that's interesting. Maybe we could do something with it. So he back then was teaching sound design. There is in like a technical university in Turin, and they have a faculty, a course studies thing about cinema. So what they did was that he created two versions of this short film. In one version, he just kept the original soundtrack that I created, just recording it as it was. And in the other one, he filled it with a lot of subliminal noises and sounds. which were very subtle. Some were ultrasounds, some were ultra bass, I don't know, ultra low sounds. So some are noises and sounds that you barely cannot capture. Your ear cannot capture it, but you perceive it somehow. It's some either below or beyond at the range of what our ear can understand. One of his students in this faculty was doing a whole thesis about statistics connected to cinema and how statistics can be used for cinema purposes. So they took two groups of students from the university, like 30 people and 30 people, and to them they showed these two different versions, and they made a questionnaire for the both of them. Questions that were, now I don't remember all of them, but they were very psychological questions. Like, question was, how do you think is the weather outside of the room of what is going on, or which scene did provoke you any disturbance, and then they would take the results and analyze them, and the differences were huge. The version that he did with all these noises and ultrasounds and everything were very disturbing to people. Some people were feeling sick, some people were feeling noise, and basically what he explained to me is that your brain cannot understand what this sound is, because you perceive it, but you cannot codify it. So your brain connects it to the visual stimulus that what you're watching. So it enhances the effect of what's going on. So a scene that would normally be okay, with that added stimulus makes it even more powerful. And it's a trick that surely has been used in the first Paranormal Activity. In which they have all these sounds. And I remember back then people were feeling sick, were leaving the theater. And yeah, I think it's borderline legal. In some occasions, it's considered almost legal because it is used, it's been seen as a manipulation of the audience that is not healthy. So, and for a whole feature film, he told me, the sound designer, if we should use the same tricks for like a 1 hour and a half film, it would be almost intolerable. It would be too much. On 10 minutes, you can manage it, but for such a long time in a movie theater, it's just too much.
Yeah. It didn't Irreversible use a similar technique?
Well, could be.
In the credits, he did that. It was an epilepsy warning, but and also in the credits, he slightly that may be the not Irreversible. Actually, that may be.
I thought it was Gaspar. No, I thought it was during the rape.
Sounds a lot like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rape scene, there is a whistle. Yeah, definitely.
And he was using a low frequency. And because I remember people were saying it was making them like physically ill.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah. Yeah, well, it should, because
it's an 11-minute uncut rape scene. So, mission accomplished.
It's interesting because we're a fan of like avant-garde film and horror, and these themes kind of like the thing about the genre of horror is it's very emotional and human, and it's kind of people overcoming horrors, and yet in that moment, it's almost like a director punching you, and then you're like, "Did you just hit me?" And he's like, "Yeah." That's the point. Like, I wanted you to be almost like vomiting, because it is a horrible thing. Yeah. And now, hearing that and the fact that it's illegal in some places.
Don't quote me on that. Maybe I said maybe it's just frowned upon. I don't know if it's illegal, but
it does feel a little bit Clockwork Orange-ish, where you're kind of like, hey, I'm going to show you some images and I'm going to zap you or something. And the next time they come up, maybe you'll hearken back there mentally.
Well, at the same time, I have to say I see it a bit as it's a trick. I suppose that you should be able, with your imagery, with your craft as a director, as sound designer, cinematographer, the whole team, you should be able to provoke this kind of responses without making me sick with a trick that's just physical.
It all goes back to William Castle, man.
Oh, get out. No, it's actually hearing Maxie say that, because he's a documentary filmmaker. Now, again, I have an extensive history and learned education in documentary. I took a single class in community college.
Where's my puke bucket?
I know. Yeah, that low vibration is supposed to make you puke here. Now, I remember we had one guest, and I've talked about this ad nauseum on this show.
So take a shot.
But he came in and said, you know, the thing about documentary is every choice you make is a manipulation. And it's interesting hearing you say that because, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of it. Like if you put a dude in a lab coat and have him talk about, you know, bioengineering, people are going to connect those dots mentally. And dude, lab coat studies, that's a huge thing. People will, what was that one social experiment where they had the dial and they told you you're shocking somebody on the other end? And they had a dude come up and tell you to turn it up and you would hear like a scream.
Was it the Stanford experiment? They made
that one. Stanford, I think, was the prison one. Where
the prison.
Yeah, but it's the
prisons
same
and
idea.
guards.
It's like it's all manipulation. And again, you know what? Let me tie this back into why you need to make mockumentaries, because we need to wake up people to this shit. And what better way than with Gerber Syndrome, where, you know, a close friend who I would never show anything terrible to is like, what the hell is this COVID denier shit? And I'm like, it's a well-made fucking horror movie. And Maxie, I mean, I think you might be the perfect guy to make more of these films. So,
well, thank you.
You have a built-in audience here. In fact, I double as a cheerleader, and I'll tell everybody about your work.
Wow, I'm flattered. Thank you very much.
And I think we're out of time.
I was recently, I had a very enraging experience. I was very enraged.
Here we go.
There was this festival where that shown our I'll Stand By You film last week, and there was this real documentary, real, not a mockumentary, called the Spy. I think the Mole. I think it's a Danish filmmaker. And he made this film about the North Korea. There is this basically this guy who infiltrated the association in Europe about North Korea. I mean, basically, to make it short, this filmmaker, in agreement with this guy who infiltrated for real this crew of North Koreans in Europe that were trying to get money to finance their plans in North Korea, they basically created this whole thing, this whole joke. It's on the edge of being a mockumentary, you could say, because they hired an actor who pretended to be a billionaire, who started meeting these North Korean officials in Shanghai and in Europe to prove that North Koreans are basically undercover selling weapons to European organizations in Europe that are then sold to terrorists. I mean, the whole scheme of things.
Yeah.
And there was the screening, and they showed this film, and there was this guy who's an actor, who was very bold guy actor, telling how, I mean, here, obviously, they risked their lives because they went to Pyongyang and met with these people, and they were basically spies filming these meetings. So, of course, it was dangerous. And to me, I was so enraged because they made this whole thing, this whole scheme. And I was expecting that at the end they would say, you know, after these and these experiences, we've collected this and this evidence, which were given to this and these prosecutors, so that something changed. The law was upended and people were judged, and this didn't happen. It's not going to happen anymore. But it's none of that. It ends like a big joke. It ends like the director of this film shows up in the end and just says, well, yeah, we did it. It was just fun. And to me, I was so enraged because people in this film, the North Koreans, are probably dead, because when this came out, they're going to be punished, and somebody is paying for this because this happened. For you to make a film that has been shown in festivals and going around. And to me, this was very outraging. And I think that in some occasions, it seems that documentary filmmakers don't have this sense of responsibility, that you're filming real people and there are consequences when you go and film them, and you have to be very careful. And the fact that they're far away in an enclosed country which you're never going to enter again, maybe for you it means nothing, but for them it's life or death situation. And I felt very, very angry about this. And when I raised the question with the director at the Q&A, he was like, well, but yeah, maybe, but these are, you know, the North Koreans, they're bad anyways. But who are you to say? Who are you to judge? These people, I mean, they're people, they're doing their job, they're in a system, which of course is wrong and everything. But so, yeah, I wanted to share this experience that I felt.
Beautiful. I love that. And honestly, because I don't think I've ever thought that way before. When hearing you mention that, it makes me think back to like Sacha Baron Cohen with all of, was it Brüno? who went to like the Middle East and was interviewing
Could be.
terrorists. And he was like, he called them like dirty Santa Claus and stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different thing, but like, definitely in a communist regime, a lot of those countries they don't end up working because you can never deliver bad news, and they always shoot the messenger, and then you make a mockumentary and they're in it, and it's like it's showing all over the world. Yeah, those people, they may not be dead, but they're definitely being tortured.
Yeah.
God, how do you turn? Leave it to Maxie to turn a movie. I looked up The Mole while he was talking. It looks so goofy, and yet, you know, you package it in this way where now I'm like, God, actually, did you watch The Mole?
No.
This film, yeah, I was at the screening. Yeah.
I know you were, but it looks like a film that Clark had covered on this show before. Oh, am I looking at the wrong Mole? What year did this? I'm looking at 2020. Maxie, look up are you on a computer right now? Look up the Mole Agent from 2020. I'm a fucking idiot.
The Mole Undercover North Korea.
No. The one you're looking at was Oscar nominated. It has nothing to do with it. It's South.
Oksana, can you pull that up for whatever kind of video component we do?
Yeah, no, it's called The Mole Undercover in North Korea.
Yeah, I found it very easily.
I
because,
know.
Yeah.
I was mostly listening, and I pull up the first thing on IMDb. That image, that's what I was picturing the whole time. Like that.
But it would have been fun to have the old guy with the lens.
He wouldn't have made it out. If that guy had a little camera in his lapel, that guy's not making it back.
Yeah.
Maxie, man, I love you. And
Thank you.
The Gerber Syndrome is such a powerful film. And I think the horror community, for anybody listening out there, the minute it's available, I will make sure y'all can see it. And I know in the UK, we've had people reach out and said it's available streaming. I believe it might be in there. Yeah, and they were able to find it. But do yourself a favor and watch this film from 2011 that's more poignant now than it ever was. And it repackages zombies in a completely different light. And I don't know. I think y'all be a better horror fan for having seen it and share it. Cool. And Maxie, and when your new film comes out and you got a little bit, please touch base with us again. We'd love to promote it and check it out.
Thank you. With pleasure. Again,
so sorry for making you wait an extra hour. Normally this is the part where I try to milk as much time until Clark literally pulls the plug on the Ethernet cable. And I'm carrying so much guilt right now. It's
okay. I wasn't standing out in the rain waiting, so it's okay.
Maxie, man, I love you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.